Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another day 13. We're past the halfway mark, getting closer to Christmas. AI in 15. Every morning at AI 15, we spend 15 minutes to do one thing with AI to get us in tip-top shape for the new year. My name is Matthew Kershaw. I have had 20 plus years in content marketing, digital media, 6 years in AI, and I help companies and businesses build modern marketing engines, help their people use AI in a safe way and practical way, and build them a roadmap towards better quality, speed, and lower cost. But enough about me. Today's topic is synthetic users, which is the idea of using AI doubles to test ideas. And we have a very, very special guest, Conor Comerford from Ireland, dialing in from, I believe, Dublin. But we'll get to him in a second. I'll hand over. But just to sort of quickly recap on the idea of synthetic users, the idea is that you, instead of going and talking to real people with all the messiness that implies, you can instead survey and focus group with AI generated personas. And I first wrote about this back in the summer, and there was a lot of question marks about how accurate it was. And then there was a really, really interesting piece of research came out from Qualtrics, which is where Connor works, which showed kind of it had nearly identical results to human panels, and that was because Qualtrics were able to bring the the proprietary data that that they had, years and years and thousands of, maybe millions of data points to bear in this situation to create much more accurate responses. So on that basis, I'm going to hand over to Connor. I'm going to stop sharing.
Great. I might just give myself a quick introduction. Yeah, my name's Connor. Like you said, Matthew, based in Dublin and Qualtrics, EMEA headquarters. I suppose my background really is a traditional market researcher. So I actually started quite young in what's now an Ipsos business in Ireland and worked in a couple of different market research agencies. But it was, I hate to overuse the word traditional, but as a contrast to Qualtrics, it certainly was in that, we were doing our qualitative and quantitative research, our standard sort of focus groups and developing surveys and so on. Been at Qualtrics the last 7 years or so. Qualtrics, we do CX, customer experience, EX, but also market research. And so my role has been quite similar, for most of the past 7 years or so, and that I've been running research projects. But over the last maybe 2 years or so, we've started to develop this synthetic research model. Honestly, to begin with, I was a bit skeptical. I was using AI in my job to do things like maybe ideate about survey design or maybe interpret data sets to some extent, but sort of just dipping my toes in and was skeptical about the idea of, actually having AI or some sort of synthetic model as your source of insight. But suffice to say, I've really come around to it as the product and the model has developed, and as I've been able to work with it and speak to a lot of our customers over the past year or so. So I can see it already in 2025 having a real impact on the research landscape, and certainly more to come in 2026. I just want to talk briefly about synthetic data as a term. And I just wanted to flash this up because you can see here on the left, the idea there is what first comes to mind when these researchers hear the term synthetic. And so we hear the term synthetic persona a lot, and probably because that is, certainly from what I can tell and from what this indicates, the most common manifestation of synthetic data. And that's where you might sit down and actually have a chat with a persona that's been engineered to represent a particular segment that you're interested in. And that's something that certainly is part of our model, but it's not necessarily what we've started with and what's at the forefront. So what we're really working on and like I said, putting at the forefront is the third one down that you see there, which is simulated individual level data. So to put that in simple terms, it's essentially recreating a quantitative data set where, again, if you maybe had a question that you wanted to answer or a certain piece of stimulus you wanted to test, traditionally you might go out and survey 1,000 consumers to try to represent a broader population. But the idea is that our synthetic model will generate outputs in that format. And it has a couple of distinct advantages.
I think one of them is you can look at relationships within the data in the same way that you might within a quantitative data set. So, for example, you might want to narrow in on a particular cohort, a particular segment within that data set, but you want to be able to see a bit of variance, or in a lot of cases, a lot of variance within that segment. And with a synthetic persona, that's a single response, or if you're not using the correct source to generate all of these thousand responses, you're not going to see that variance. And the other advantage is that it can give our users and our customers the ability to gain confidence in the robustness of the model themselves. And that's by simply, running the same survey through a synthetic model and then also collecting responses from human beings and seeing the similarities. I suppose a lot of the value that we've seen our users getting from our model early on is, let's say, in respect of new ideas or new stimulus. So, I think AI and general purpose models, already are quite useful for anybody, whether they're in a marketing or insights or product development role. And that, if you want to find out the incidence rate of a certain behavior in the UK, oftentimes, a standard LLM can help you get most of the way there with that. But anytime you have new or unique stimulus, or you want to test out new ideas and understand how to prioritize and develop, that's where we've seen a lot of value. And also in terms of, let's say, very quick turn objectives. So this is a hypothetical scenario that I used my good friend Gemini to come up with, but it's very similar to a lot of our real use cases at the moment. So let's just imagine that we're developing an online campaign. It's quite last minute. And we have a promotion around a coffee subscription box. And really our key objective is we need to understand which messages or calls to action are going to resonate most and are going to encourage click through for this campaign. So the old problem in our traditional world is that if you needed some directional insight on that, it would be quite expensive. It would be quite time consuming. If you're trying to turn this around within a number of days or a week, that's oftentimes just simply not possible in that traditional world. So that's where something like a synthetic model comes in. So for the purpose of this exercise, I generated 20 ideas for a tagline or a call to action. Again, with my friend Gemini, and you can see it was sort of suggested that it's grouped under these four themes. So that's sort of the input for my survey. So what I want to do is just switch over to the Qualtrics interface and just show you how that works. So this is the Qualtrics Survey Builder, and I suppose the advantage really is that you're building surveys for human beings and for synthetic users in the same platform. So again, you could field your survey to both audiences at the same time. Um, so what I might just do first is put in a couple of maybe defining criteria about who my audience is going to be. So you'll see in a minute when I go to actually set up the synthetic users, I can define things like I can define, let's say, the demographics in terms of the gender and the age that my synthetic audience should represent. But the good thing about these synthetic responses is that I can actually, as they go through each question, each individual response is going to build up a profile of itself based on how it's answering. So if in the previous question it says that one of its key interests is sports cars or something like that, it's going to answer every subsequent question with that context in mind and build up a personality as it goes through. So in this case, what I'm doing with these first two questions is I'm actually trying to define what my audience is going to be beyond just simple demographics. So I'm basically, by giving just a single answer choice in these first two questions, I'm basically training or prompting my entire data set to be frequent online shoppers and frequent coffee drinkers. So they're the only two criteria I'm going to use. Like I said, I can define my demographic criteria, but I want to just simply add in my prompt that I've just pasted in here, which is a brief description of what the product is. I don't want to go into too much detail because in a real life scenario, if somebody's just scrolling through and seeing this ad, they're not necessarily going to have lots of detail on what this product is. So I want to keep the detail light. Um, but yeah, here I'm simply going to just paste in my 20 different taglines, and then I should be almost ready to go. Let's see if this works here. Brilliant. Pasted nicely. My 20 items in here. That's really all I need. What I might do is I might allow this to be a multiple choice and prompt my respondents to pick their top three. And then what I'm going to do as a final question is just have a single choice, which will just give me a helpful share of 100%, which can often just be quite useful to make the interpretation as quick as it possibly can. And then I should be ready to go in terms of generating my synthetic responses. So quick look over and it looks okay. Um, so now I'm simply going to distribute this to a synthetic audience. So here again, I can field to lots of different panels and there is an ability to customize this as much as I want. But like I said, I might sort of gear my demographic profile maybe slightly more towards a female audience. I think maybe I'll focus more so on my 25 to 44s. Again, this is just something I can do without necessarily having to include survey questions in there. And then I'm simply ready to go in terms of generating my responses. What it's going to do now is it's going to take, sometimes as little as 2 minutes, sometimes more. I've picked 500 responses to generate. That's sort of similar to a standard quantitative data set. I can generate more, but I think the law of diminishing returns when it comes to our synthetic users does very much apply, even more so than in human samples. So once you get to the 500 mark or so, unless you really want to cut your audience into small little slices, there isn't much benefit in going any narrower than that. Just very quickly go back to my ready-made model. But it's as instant as that, really. And so in terms of trying to answer that objective that I had originally, and in the traditional world being faced with impossible barriers in terms of time, budget, resource. I've got directional insight here, and not just a synthetic persona telling me what it thinks is the best, but breaking down in terms of percentages and relationships. And so I can take from this that certainly those top five, which were all in theme one, are certainly the most popular. I can go down and, like I said, I can look at my percentage share of 100% and I can see those relative relationships where this particular tagline or call to action is the favorite. It's closely followed by the second, and then there's quite a bit of a gap down. And so maybe if I wanted a little bit of variance, I might include two, or I might conclude that certainly theme one is the way to go and move forward with that in mind. But yeah, that's the idea, and certainly this kind of objective and use cases where we're seeing a lot of usage and a lot of value in these early days.
Brilliant. Super interesting. Thanks so much, Connor. So very, very powerful tool there. I think allows you to do that kind of research at many, many points during your during the phase of a campaign or a product creation. So really gets you into some interesting spaces. Just to say, tomorrow we're looking at video editing with AI, and our very own Sharon Barraclough, who I urge you all now to call Shazza Bazza, is going to showing us how to use AI to help clean up your footage, create clips, add voiceover, and even create a body double, which is going to be very exciting. So come back tomorrow. Tell your friends, wolf.co/sign up. That's wolf with two O's.co/sign up. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.
Connor, thanks, Matthew.